Avatar: The Last Airbender coming out with another live action series, but this one on Netflix. Oh boy. Another animation going to live action. It's been already done once, and people didn't like it then. What makes you think Netflix is going to do any different? While discussing films putting up the live action shots of The Last Airbender, and honestly, it doesn't look anything too very different from what M. Night Shyamalan did with his version of it. It's not hugely different. The cast, the characters, the outfits look very similar to the show, but there's a new controversy on the horizon on this one. Well, the biggest thing coming out here is the actor that's playing Sokka apparently isn't indigenous. Oh my god, someone has to act to do things for a movie or a show. You know, acting, apparently because you don't have your papers in order, now it disqualifies you from being able to play these parts. This is age-old tale of it once again. Back when M. Night Shyamalan did his version of the show, well, it's just recently people are now comparing his version of the show as a whitewashed version of the Avatar. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is where we are in the culture, pop culture nowadays. If you're not the right gender, if you're not the right papers in front of you, your papers, please tell me that you can play, act, or do things naturally. So when I saw the actors and actresses for the new Netflix version, I was like, that doesn't look crazy different from the M. Night Shyamalan one. What's really going to be the difference here? And then this article pops up on top of it, decoding the politics of Hollywood's whitewashing through M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender. This was dated October 2021. I didn't even see this then, and now I'm looking at it going, what? What? Yes, the actress that played Katana is Jewish. All three of the main characters were all born in the States, but two of them had German ancestry and all this other stuff. But did that really matter? Does that really matter for this version of the show? Them taking the actual outfits and making it the way it was? I just kind of sat there. I was like, I didn't even look at this. I don't see that movie like that. And it's absolutely ridiculous that the whitewashing problem of The Last Airbender was something then, and now it continues on with the new version being spoken out against, saying Sokka doesn't have his proper papers. Like they go down in here showing actual documents, how proof that he's in a fake tribe and not Cherokee and all this other stuff. And you just kind of go, isn't this a fantasy world where the tribes are made up and the indigenous leaders and the indigenous tribes are based off true people or based off true stories? And now you're playing that part. You're playing you're trying to bring life to a more authentic version, but because your papers and everything doesn't align with what you're seeing on the screen, once again, this is something similar to, I'm going to go back to the Little Mermaid here, where they changed things up there with the Little Mermaid from what it originally was. Now, there's certain levels here where you get a completely different disassociation of the type of character that's playing it, the type of story it was, where the cultural shift of the place where the story was written to, do they actually look and play the part? Can they look and play the part? That's the differences here. The Little Mermaid, they completely race swapped the Little Mermaid to something that was not recognizable. They completely changed the hair color. I think that was the biggest thing for me, where the hair was not that fiery, bright red. I didn't honestly care who played the role, because there is a lot of African American singers that could belt out the tone, and so I can see that in that sense. But once again, there's that cultural shift. Now with this, these actors and actresses look like they can play the role, but because people went online and found that they're not actually indigenous, Does that actually warrant them not to be able to play the role? This is where we are today. People aren't allowed to act. People aren't allowed to be who they want to be or who they can be. It's like the Lilo and Stitch situation where they got one of the characters or one of the actors kicked off because they weren't Hawaiian enough. They weren't the proper skin color. They got them kicked off off the movie because of that. And now they're trying to jump on this and do the same thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's just some things with live action that doesn't translate from the cartoons, from the animes. It just doesn't translate over. The big anime eyes, the actual way movement happens. You can try and put it in there and make these sets look absolutely amazing, but it just doesn't translate. And this is once again a live action that's being adapted. Now, M. Night Shyamalan's, I thought he did an okay job trying to translate it over, but there was so much detail that was missed in his version of the story of the first book that I felt like it fell flat. There was so much that was overlooked. There was things that they could have done very differently that probably would have made it a lot better. Overall, he picked actors and actresses that weren't really known, very much like the old school Lucas Arts, where people weren't very highly sought after, weren't highly known at the time. You had Harrison Ford, you had Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. They were nobodies in the industry for the most part. And hell, Harrison Ford picked up the indie role being an electrician. I was an electrician or a set hand on there, and they said, okay, you're playing this role now. Like, that was where they moved on, and why undiscovered actors in that case can be some of the best versions of these shows. But when it comes to live action, there's a very big difference between anime, cartoon, and in live action. They don't translate as well, as neatly. Things get very mixed up. You have your CGI, and then you have people that sit there and try and tell you that they can't sit there and play these roles because they don't encapsulate the version of the characters. Look at Family Guy. Did they not replace Cleveland? Look at Simpsons. They replaced Apu because they were voiced by people that didn't match the character on the screen. However, they were doing a good job encapsulating the cultures. Like, this is where we are today, where you're not allowed to act unless you're part of that culture. You're not allowed to be that person if you aren't gay enough. Like, it doesn't make any sense now. Like, the acting is now becoming a lost art at this point, where you have to be everything encapsulating in that role before you can even step foot into a studio, before you can step foot in front of a screen, just for them to bring out the best of it. Directors and producers are trying to tell stories the best way they can, and sometimes that means reaching into the bag of tricks and bringing up CGI and doing all these things. But live action just doesn't translate very well, especially when you have people sitting here and trying to gatekeep and trying to tell you they can't play these roles because they don't have their proper papers, please. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm your proud Canadian Phoenix Cinder Shadow, signing off here.